Hi everybody, Ian Bremmer here with your world in more than 60 seconds. Coronavirus keeps on giving, so do I, over 60 seconds until we can get through this damn crisis. Boy, I'm sick of it. I know you are too. Here are your questions. Number one, what is going on between the WHO, the US, and China? Well, we need someone to blame for this virus crisis, right? I mean, you're going to have Trump elected or not elected in November on the back of well over 100,000 deaths, on the back of horrible economic performance and unemployment, no real bounce seen before November. In fact, probably a second wave coming just before elections, given seasonality of the virus, which means you got to blame China. You got to blame the World Health Organization, and that means the Americans threatening to pull out of the organization as a whole, saying that they're doing lifting for the Chinese, and also demanding investigation, as are other countries, of China for how they handled the initial outbreak of the disease. I am much more sympathetic to the U.S. and other calls about Chinese responsibility because it's pretty clear they did mishandle and did cover up the early days of this virus. And the Chinese are saying that they're only prepared to accept an investigation after the crisis is over, and the WHO is saying that's 3 to 5 years from now. I agree on the time frame. Certainly don't agree that that would be an appropriate way to handling it. And a lot of countries around the world, particularly allies of the United States, are increasingly putting pressure on China in that regard. Big trade dust-up between the Chinese and the Australians as a consequence of that. And by the way, not directed by the United States, which is interesting. Australia did that all by themselves. Secondly, how are lockdown measures affecting Turkey during Ramadan? Well, I mean, Erdogan, the president who was trying to reopen the economy, understands that the numbers that they're going to see if they allow for fully people to come to mass prayers and the rest during Ramadan would lead to much more significant outbreaks. They have gotten their testing regime up significantly. Their economy's in real trouble. They're keeping it locked down while Ramadan is going on, and that is a smart move for him. Certainly one of the economies out there that I am most concerned about. They're going to need to go someplace for international aid. Most likely that's the IMF, and Erdogan wants no part of it. He said publicly, absolutely not. Horrible organization. They force all sorts of reforms that are unacceptable, put you under their thumb. But if it's not them, I don't see money for them. And the potential for a really messy exit, capital controls, default, that kind of thing, seems to me reasonably high in the coming year in Turkey. How is Vladimir Putin and Russia handling the pandemic? Pretty badly. Doctors keep getting thrown out of windows in Russia. We don't like to see that. Doctors that are dealing with the coronavirus. They've been clearly not upfront around how many people were getting this disease in the early days, as well as how many people have been dying from it. Russia now has the second highest number of cases in the world that they're reporting, though the death toll is still pretty low, quite low, because they don't, if people die from other illnesses, even if they have coronavirus, they usually will put the other illness. There's been a lot of doctors that are saying this is being mishandled. Putin presently at 59% approval ratings. That's the worst approval rating of his entire presidency. Keep in mind that also that's on the back of $30 oil, big fight that was mistimed with the Saudis on that front, and of course economic contraction. Look, Putin has no opposition to speak of in the country. He's not under any pressure to leave. He's not under any pressure to go anywhere. Even after this term is over, he's changing the Constitution over time. He's going to be president for life. But he's not governing very well, and his economy and his country is actually in pretty severe decline. And that's pretty obvious in what they can and can't do in other parts of the world. Finally, another health minister gone. Where is Brazil in its coronavirus response? Pretty much the worst that we've seen of any major democracy around the world now. 2 health ministers, both of whom were pretty capable, fired within 4 weeks. Not something you normally want to see, but really not something you want to see during a pandemic. And it's because in Brazil, they're saying that everyone should be taking the miracle drug chloroquine. Of course, we now have President Trump saying he's taking hydroxychloroquine himself, even though the FDA is saying you shouldn't. But still, he hasn't gotten rid of Fauci or a second, head of the infectious disease response in the United States after Fauci. So I still think that Bolsonaro really, by strong head and shoulders, deserves the accolade for most incompetent response of a democracy to coronavirus. See you all next week.